Well, thank you very much, Dr. Spencer, and to all the scientists, economists that have participated today and will be participating throughout the rest of the conference agenda. Earlier it was asked what we are doing or what we can do to convey the message. The message is that we're hearing today, what sound science tells us, to people around the country, to people who may not have ready access to the truth because of the filter that is the media. And at the Heartland Institute, we're doing our best to get the word out through our website, through Environment and Climate News, which we publish on a monthly basis, by bringing scientists like Dr. Roy Spencer and many others to state legislatures, to community forums around the country. It's equally important that we have bulwarks in Congress who are not afraid to raise their voices and stand up for sound science. And in Congress, it can be just as difficult to stand up, to take that stand, to take the heat for saying something that may be politically unpopular, but nevertheless we know is true. And it's my pleasure to introduce, as our second keynote speaker, one of those members of Congress who was standing up for the truth, who was spreading the truth about the climate, about the science, about the economics, even 4, 5, 6 years ago, when it was far more politically where you had to pay a far greater political price to do so than you do today. It's still very difficult today. But 4, 5, 6 years ago, we had a more difficult time even than now getting the word out. And our next speaker was not afraid to do it then. He's not afraid to do it now. It's my great pleasure to introduce, serving in his 11th term from the great state of California, the Honorable Dana Rohrabacher.
I am humbled to speak before this audience. I, of course, am a member of the Science Committee, but that doesn't give me any credentials to speak about science. I always remind people that I do know a little bit about science. I know there are protons and neutrons, electrons, and morons. And I'm afraid that I fall into that latter category because I am not a scientist by profession. And by the way, I'm also not a lawyer, which of course was one of the great, that was my most effective campaign slogan, vote for Dana, at least he's not a lawyer. So, but what I was a journalist in my younger years, in and out of journalism for about 10 years prior to going with Ronald Reagan to the White House. And one of my assignments as a young reporter was to go and to cover a speech that I thought I was going to really have a lot of fun with, being an ocean person, being a surfer and a scuba diver. I was assigned to go cover a speech by Jacques Cousteau. Ah, yes, and my hero, and I could hear all the dreams about going out on the Calypso and seeing all the oceans and things. So I went there, and he was giving a speech before a group of college students. And the college students, he was basically, I have never heard such pessimism in my life. I mean, it was, the oceans are dying. You will be denied the right to go into the oceans. Everything will be goo, black goo. In 10 years, the oceans will be dead. Okay, so even then I sort of felt, maybe we should see if there's a little bright side to this gloomy picture. So afterwards, I came up to him and I turned my tape recorder on and introduced myself and said, you were pretty pessimistic about the future. Aren't there some other things that might be happening in the future with the ocean that would be positive things? I understand there are reports now that maybe there will be shellfish and other sources of protein can actually be farmed on the ocean and things such as, and he gets right up into my face, this French garlic breath there. And pardon me. And he goes, "Didn't you hear me? 10 years from now, the oceans will be dead. All of them black goo." I was thinking about that. About a week ago, I was out on my surfboard in my district, and this pelican comes down right in front of my surfboard, grabbing fish and then flying away. And a few minutes later, the porpoises are swimming by. And, every surfer knows if you squeak the bottom of your board, rub the bottom of your board, it makes a noise, and the porpoises will actually come around and sort of look at you and talk to you. And I'm looking at this, and it's such a beautiful day, and the water is so clean. And I started thinking about Jacques Cousteau. And anyway, we won't get into black goo right now, but he's long gone. and the oceans are not dead, and the oceans are not black goo, and those young people that he was talking to were not being given accurate information to make their judgments in the future on. Let me also note that I meet every student that comes from my district to this city. I am their representative, and I try to give them a chance to speak to me. And they ask me all the questions, and I generally ask them one question as well. And that question always is, when I went to high school back here in Southern California 45 years ago, do you believe the air was a lot dirtier or a lot cleaner than it is today? And 90% adamantly will suggest that the air back then was so much cleaner. And how lucky you are to have lived at a time when the air was so clean in Southern California. I don't need to go into detail, but somebody's lying to somebody. That's what it comes down to. Somebody is intentionally telling wrong things, especially to our young people. So, with that said, who are these people and why are they saying these things? Let us note that maybe people have, like Jacques Cousteau, a benevolent motive. Or maybe they are just being dishonest because they have self-interest at heart, and they're part of some coalition with some sort of self-interest at heart. I don't know. But all I know is that the specter of man-made global warming is basically been promulgated, this idea, this concept, and it's being used as a method of stampeding the public and also now elected officials into basically accepting what I consider to be the biggest power grab in the history of humankind. And that's... Okay, I don't have to detail for you, and I'm sure you've got this already, the heavy-handed global warming propaganda campaign, and it's been on. You've seen it. The question is why honest people have gone along with it. You know, we know that there are people up there, they know what they're doing, but why is it that it's taken so long for especially leaders of the scientific community to step forward and express themselves, even in light of the fact that there's this other barrage coming on? Why is it taking so long for people in the scientific community to stand up? The rest of us, you can understand why, because we're befuddled. We aren't scientists. We don't know, and we admit we don't know. But people in the science community, I think, were given a message very shortly after President Clinton was elected. And that's when Dr. William Happer, who was, of course, the chief scientist at the Department of Energy, was abruptly dismissed from his job. And from that moment on, what we had was 8 years of a one-sided drumbeat, one-sided promotions, one-sided research grants, one-sided thinking, and this is basically, if I can read my own writing here, and in this atmosphere, we had leaders who just would not step forward, perhaps because people were afraid they would not get their government grants. Now, let's be self-examining here. If that was the motive, that's the motive. Whatever it was, we haven't had the answering of arguments. We have had a one-sided presentation being given to the American people. So here we are now, years later, on the edge. We have laws, taxation, controls, regulations, mandates. All of them are about to be enacted into law because we've had 15 years of a one-sided debate. Now, even people in my GOP friends don't want to take this on even now. A lot of them are suggesting, well, let's just say that what's being presented will cost too much money and won't have enough of an impact. Let's just make that argument. Okay, I think that, frankly, that argument doesn't hold, and I personally believe that if the world is coming to an end because of man-made global warming, that the cost isn't too high for us to destroy the economy and to do all of these draconian things, eliminate human freedom because we got to save the planet after all. Okay, so I don't believe that that's the way to go about it. And I think that strategy has been used by people, again, who are too frightened to come and to try to take on the fundamental issue, the fundamental science issue. Could I bless that water? Thank you. The bottom line is that the science behind the global warming proposals in Congress and the draconian laws that will follow are based on faulty science. That's the bottom line. So this is not just a cost-benefit analysis of current legislation. So that perhaps the fact that those people who are engaged in this one-sided debate that has been one-sided all of this time, that's why they have been so intent to stifle the debate, because they know that it's wrong. How many, we've heard it, I mean, case closed. How many times you got to hear case closed before you realize that somebody has a purpose in mind, and it's not to have an honest discussion of an issue? Of course, Al Gore takes no questions. Has anyone noticed that? I mean, he gives lots of speeches. He doesn't take questions. I've taken a lot of questions. I don't know if I'll have time today, but I will tell you I've taken a lot of questions on this. And of course, what about no grants for skeptics? How about name calling? Now, did anyone see me on Chris Matthews about a week ago? What the hell is a troglodyte anyway, or whatever? What did he call me? Troglodyte? That's not the thing hanging from the wall in a cavern, I don't think. But, you know, all I can tell you is that I thought that was the level of debate that they offered me on that program was equivalent to what has been the debate for the last 15 years. I brought up very serious scientific issues, and they called me names. I mean, and what is it? And they also said that you don't exist. You said, every scientific mind in the world with any respectability doesn't agree with you and agrees with us on man-made global warming. You know, you just don't exist. I'm speaking here to an audience where 3/4 of the tables are empty, I guess. But this is the type of what I consider a dishonest approach to the discussion that now has led us to this situation where I believe our people, our country, our freedom is in jeopardy. So let's demonstrate very quickly with some science-based challenges, and I don't have to go into this in detail with you guys who know this, right? But here's some challenges. Let's say if whoever is reporting on this event, and I'm sure we got some journalists here, perhaps it would be nice to say, and the body suggested there were some questions that needed to be answered before people can dramatically raise taxes and dramatically try to control the lives of the people of this country. So let's ask and make some challenges on the science. First and foremost, what always stood out when I was at these hearings on global warming was the fact that when they brought the charts up, see, here's global warming. You can see it going up right there. But what's this? What is this where it starts? Way down here. What is that? Well, that's the 1850s. You know, I may not be a scholar, but I really love the History Channel. I really do. And I had seen several times this story about the Little Ice Age. Didn't that end in the 1850s? Wasn't that about the time that we had a 500-year decline in temperatures in the world? You guys are the scientists. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what it was. And of course, I asked that question at a couple hearings at the Science Committee. It was never answered. That question was never answered. Why you used the baseline, and if we are indeed 1 degree warmer, or even 2 degrees warmer, from the point that it was the 500-year low in temperatures, what's the big deal? I mean, think about it. If you use a phony baseline that represents nothing but a 500-year low, what difference does it make if it's 1 or 2 degrees warmer now? So I always thought that was a bit dishonest. So maybe they could explain to us, the first challenge is, how can you use the 1850s as a baseline for determining the rise in temperature and expect to be taken seriously if that was the bottom of a 500-year decline? Okay. Now, let's see, some of the others here. Yes, the other thing, of course, the 500-year decline represents what? A cycle of weather. It does not take a genius. Now, I did receive a B in geology when I was in college, okay? I took history mainly and all those other classes that I could get through and still go and raise hell out on the lawn, the campus, or go surfing and get away from it all. But I did have to take certain science classes. One was geology. And one thing that I remember about geology were all of these cycles. I mean, they have cycles of history and geological cycles as well. So if we've had all of these cycles in the past, how come this cycle is so much different that we're going to have to destroy everybody's take-home pay and take away their freedom? You know, how come? Well, and this cycle, all the other cycles, everybody admits the other cycles had to be sort of natural because on many of the cycles, humankind hadn't emerged yet as a powerful force unless, of course, we have these fires and things that they used to start. Maybe that was the source of all that CO2 that caused the cycles to go that way. I don't think so. So if all the other cycles were not created by mankind, why is it we're so sure that this cycle was created by mankind, and what created the other cycles? I tend to think, and again, I'm no expert, and I'm open-minded about it, but it just seems to parallel certain solar activity that was going on and led to cycles, which sort of makes sense because that's a huge factor on the climate of this planet is the sun. And of course, we now have seen one cycle that we see, and I always remind people, the polar ice cap is melting. The poor polar bears are out there. You know, by the polar bears, most of the polar bears are okay. I understand there's actually a huge increase in the population of polar bears. There's a couple that aren't. A couple of the species aren't, but a significant number of the polar bears are, you know, basically procreating because now they don't have to stay in their little hole and asleep most of the year. Well, the bottom line is this. The polar ice cap, of course, on the North Pole, we know is melting. And if you saw this thing with Chris Matthews, the guy was trying to say, oh, how horrible it is, the polar ice caps. And by the way, I hope you all caught it. When a member of Congress said, the polar ice caps are melting, people who live near the coast, their lives are in jeopardy. I mean, if you didn't catch it, go back and watch this, that a member of Congress could make a statement like that. Anyway, let me just note that if the polar ice caps are melting, it's not just on the Earth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't the polar ice caps on Mars receding as well? Don't we have evidence that Mars and Jupiter also have polar ice caps that are retreating? Jupiter's gas. Okay, it's gas. But Mars. Okay. They are getting warm. Okay, so what we've got is a parallel trends that seem to be going on other planets that might indicate to us maybe we should think that we're talking about solar activity rather than about human activity, unless, of course, we believe that there are UFOs and that they are based on SUV technology, so, which I doubt. Okay, now, I will let you guys talk about CO2. I'm sure that's one of the issues here. But I think that it's clear that there have been prominent scientists who have in the past who thought that CO2, which is a minuscule part of the atmosphere, that the increase and humankind's contribution of that is minuscule, but that people in the past have thought maybe this was creating the cycle, climate change. Well, I also understand that there are many scientists now who've had second thoughts and re-examined that, and are now thinking that maybe CO2 is a result of warming and not a cause of warming. That I will leave up to you, but I think that there's a lot to be examined there before we use that as an excuse, which is what they're doing, to have such incredible changes in our way of life, mandated by government in order to defeat man-made global warming. So with that said, those are a few challenges. Let us note then, finally, the last challenge, which is, of course, somebody just mentioned it, it's not getting any warmer. For the last 6 or 7 years at least, it has not been getting warmer. Now, in the past, we also had time periods where it wasn't getting warmer, okay? It wasn't getting warmer, I think, in the, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the 50s, 60s, or 40s, 50s, and 60s? It was actually getting a little cooler. At that time, was CO2 going up or down in the atmosphere? Of course, it was going up, just as it's been going up for the last few years. So if CO2 causes it to get warm, why do we have cooling periods at a time when CO2 is going up? Please answer us these questions. You know, don't take away all of our take-home pay. Don't regulate our lives. Don't say that we can't have frequent flyer miles anymore, so I can't bring my family with me because we got to cut out all these useless airplane trips. Don't do that unless you really know that man-made global warming is destroying the planet. Please don't do that, okay? But it's up to you, because the other guys aren't going to ever mention any of this stuff. So anyway, what do we got here? We've basically had, you know, Al Gore has been wrong all along. The calculations that Al Gore talked about, we now know that there's been this study, and I'm sure this major issue of discussion today, that many of those stations that were supposed to be collecting the material, even here in the United States, have not been positioned correctly so that they have been compromised. And so the information that even that 1 or 2 degrees is based on is something that is not scientifically, have been scientifically gathered. I mean, this is outrageous. I mean, we have just an attempt to steamroll the debate. All of this is wrong. And it's wrong to do this. And it's wrong to say case closed. And everything I've said today, if someone wants to argue with me and disagree with me, that's okay. I'm not pretending to be Mr. Know-it-all, but I'm also not advocating things that will dramatically change your life and the life of your family and the way we live our lives in this country. And these people who have suppressed debate in this country have an agenda that is just frightening. And we can see it right now. We can see what's going on Capitol Hill, the cap and trade proposal, and the other mandates and restrictions. In and of themselves, we're talking about trillions of dollars of wealth that are going to be transferred. We are talking about controls on our way of life. This is something, as I say, dramatic. We should not do it as a stampeded herd of people who have been frightened by a one-sided debate. And that's what's been going on. And what do we face tomorrow on this? What do we face tomorrow? We know what legislation we have right now on Capitol Hill, and that's bad enough. That's gonna cut the legs out from any type of economic recovery we could hope to have. But what do we expect in the future if we continue this lie to go on? Well, you can expect that powers will be granted globally. Think about it. Man-made global warming. So we can expect that our Congress will then cure the problem, as it should, by giving power to have global controls. Thus you'll have global organizations, wonderful, benevolent, honest, and competent organizations like the United Nations. Oh my God, United Nations, half of their members are lunatics and crooks. think about this. Now think about this. We're going to have that organization which represents those kind of governments which are antithetical to everything we believe in. They're going to have an equal say on how the UN votes on these things. They are now going to be the last decider on, well, what can be built? How much can be built? This isn't local government anymore. Local government's going to have to basically conform to the global structure that's being set up. We'll have global requirements on airlines. Again, how about no frequent flyer miles? I mean, people don't understand that the fanatics on this issue believe that air travel is a huge CO2 footprint and that unneeded air traffic needs to be stamped out. Well, that means for us ordinary people. Now, of course, if you have a private jet, you can pay Al Gore some money and go anywhere you want to go. No. I'm afraid that what we're talking about is a huge change of the life of our people in a very detrimental way, and a huge flow of power out of our controlling our own lives and into Washington and into global government. Why are people so afraid, and how is this? And I'm going to go real quickly here because I've been talking too long already. Let me just note this. This is not the first time that people have been stampeded into basically believing nonsense and doing things that were detrimental to them. I'll start with just about 6 or 7 months ago when the United States Congress was stampeded into spending hundreds of billions of dollars and giving it to nobody knows who the hell got that money. Okay, just stampeded. Because some guy in authority said, the whole economy is going to collapse, give me the power and the money. And these nincompoops gave him all of our money and all of the power. And as I say, I'm sure most of it went to his buddies or his clique. Again, we don't even know where that money went to. I can tell you right now, a lot of it went to foreign banks and the Chinese banks, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll go. That just shows you what happens when educated people get stampeded. But in the past, we've had lots of examples of this, haven't we? You remember when Professor Meryl Streep told us about Alar and almost destroyed the Apple industry? I remember when I was a kid, remember the cranberry scare? I mean, I remember when my mother said, we're not going to have cranberries this Thanksgiving because they cause cancer. Okay, I mean, somebody told her. And then, of course, you have Professor Dr. Jane Fonda, who told us about the catastrophe at 3 Mile Island and acid rain. I sat next to a congressman just a couple weeks ago, and he was trying to say that, well, you see, we did what was necessary to stop acid rain, thus that we can do the same with global warming. You know, I was in the Reagan White House when we were talking about acid rain, and Ronald Reagan, thank God he did not give in, because there was the same draconian demands that were being made on our people were being made then in the name of acid rain. And Reagan said, no, we are going to do the science. We're going to do a study. And there was a $500 million study that took place, and we got scientists on both sides of the issue, and they found out, no, it wasn't something that was the end of the earth. We weren't destroying our environment. It was a small problem, not a big problem. And thus, we didn't have to destroy the freedom of our people. That means I'm supposed to end. Let me go with this. Let me just leave you with this. I think the tide has turned. And the tide has turned because people like yourselves are speaking up, and because of organizations like this who are willing to get out and outwork and to do what is necessary to gain the public attention. It has not escaped public attention that all these fanatics and alarmists like Al Gore are now using the word climate change rather than global warming. That is an admission that they were absolutely wrong. So, democracy and freedom will work if we work at it. It depends on free people all over the world standing together. I am deeply impressed with the international scientific community and this organization who've stepped up and are now willing to confront this propaganda machine before it can do its dirty work. So thank you all very much. God bless.